brother.
Hey, what's going on?
Good to see you.
All
Right,
right.
well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's panel hosted by the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance. My name is Will Driscoll, and I am the co-chair of the Alliance and a board member at the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame. And I would like to welcome you to tonight's virtual panel, Victory, Defeat, and Injury, Supporting Youth Mental Health and Wellness. As I mentioned, I am the co-chair of this alliance, along with my fellow co-chair, Sam Fabian, from the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. The Hall, CHKD, and countless other stakeholders in youth and collegiate athletics have helped us form this alliance over the last few years. And the alliance advocates for and supports a positive mental health culture for sports here in Virginia. So thank you to all who have helped the alliance in some fashion as we have gone through this formative stage. For more information on the alliance, I'll say this now, and I'll also say it at the end. You can visit yswa.org. YSWA for Youth Sports Wellness Alliance. This panel recording will also be available on the website in the coming days, so be sure to head to the website to check that out. Well, on to tonight's panel discussion. Anyone who has participated in sports at any level has no doubt experienced the peaks and valleys associated with the sports lifestyle. ABC's Wide World of Sports actually began all of their broadcasts with the tagline, "The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat." Whether it's experiencing the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, or having your sport taken away through injury, how we manage emotions throughout these processes can be a key factor in our overall mental health and wellness. So joining us tonight is a great panel of guests to help us discuss this topic, and I'm going to quickly introduce each of them, and then we'll get right into the discussion. First up, in no particular order, we have Callie Dickinson. Callie is a Virginia Beach native and an SEC champion swimmer with the University of Georgia and is currently in her postgraduate career at SEC rival Louisiana State University. She's in medical school there. So Callie, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We have Duncan MacLeod. Duncan is the owner of Elite Athletic Development Group. He's a speaker and coach with a focus on enhancing mental health strength and resilience. Duncan, good to see you again.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We have Rennel Marshall at the bottom of my screen. Rennel played football collegiately at Emory and Henry University and obtained his master's in social work from Norfolk State. He currently works with ODU Athletics as an athletic counselor and mental health coordinator, and Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters as an outpatient mental health therapist. Rennel, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We have Erin Sutton. Erin is currently a student athlete at Kempsville High School in Virginia Beach, but she is soon to be a student athlete at the University of Mary Washington in the fall. So Erin, good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We have Pete Zell. Pete is a longtime baseball coach and teacher at Ocean Lakes High School in Virginia Beach Public Schools. He has almost 400 wins on his resume and has helped over 100 players reach the collegiate level. Pete, appreciate you joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And finally, we have Daryl Tapp. Daryl is a Deep Creek High School and Virginia Tech alum. Daryl is a 12-year NFL veteran defensive lineman and currently the defensive line coach for the Washington Commanders. Daryl, thank you so much for taking some time out of what I know is a busy schedule with the draft coming up.
Happy to be here, man.
So Daryl, I'm going to go ahead and get started with you. As I mentioned, you are now in a position with the Washington Commanders, and that is a team for many people, especially here in Virginia, that has not experienced sustained success for much of the last 30 years. Following the success of this past season, making it to the NFC Championship game, how do you and your fellow coaches plan to work with the players to make sure they maintain focus and a good frame of mind heading into the offseason and ultimately next season?
Well, something that you guys probably don't really understand is that a NFL team is not really like a college program or necessarily a high school program, meaning that there's no similarity to the team before. Each year, there's only one happy team, and everybody else, even the winning team, has to start completely over from scratch. For us, we do have a quarterback that we feel very good about, but for 80% of the team, it's going to be completely new guys. So we just have to start from scratch, let them know that the things we did last year were awesome and they were cool and they were great for the organization and for the area. But going into this next year, it means nothing. Mm-hmm. So we really have to start with our foundation, our technique, our fundamentals, and just get in our right mental space to where we can handle those things that are sure to come as we prepare for the next season.
managing success is definitely a big part of creating overall success. And Callie, I'm going to come to you now. You experienced a lot of success during your career, both as a high school athlete and a student athlete at Georgia. You were multiple-time SEC champion. I had a conversation recently with Grant Holloway, Olympic gold medalist from Chesapeake, and he mentioned that winning the silver medal at the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, he couldn't really enjoy it because he felt that he fell short of his goals. Did you ever experience a situation like that where you achieved a high level of success, but internally you were struggling with maybe not reaching what you wanted to?
There are definitely multiple experiences where I felt that, especially at SECs, where I achieved something I could have never imagined achieving, medaling at SECs. And I just felt like I had failed because I was constantly comparing myself to people who weren't at the meet, who were across the world, across the country. And comparison just kind of stole the joy from me. And that was one thing I realized a little bit too late. And I just sometimes needed to take a step back and realize how far I had come and all the successes I had had for where I started as a little kid and not compare myself to others.
One thing I should say for everybody who is watching, I see plenty of people in the attending this webinar. If you would like to ask a question of the panelists, please put it in the Q&A, and I will do my best to get that over to them. So remember, we do have a Q&A that if you would like to participate, you are more than welcome to. Duncan, I'm going to come to you actually, following up on Callie's answer there. When you hear an answer like that from a top-level athlete, you talk to teams all the time. Is that something that's consistent that you hear from other teams as well, that you might experience a season like the Commanders just did, where you finish in the NFC Championship, but at the end of the day, only one team wins the Super Bowl? How should success be viewed for athletes?
Well, I think Callie had a really good point when she said that comparison is the thief of joy, because especially nowadays, and at the high school level and the college level, the social media, and them seeing people's A game and things like that, and wondering like, what am I doing wrong if I'm not doing that? But one of the points that I really make to student athletes is the fact that they have a choice on what to do with the win or the loss. They can choose to mope and I did so bad, or I didn't do this, versus, you know what, I left it all out there. As a matter of fact, the young hockey player that lives with us for the Hampton Roads Whalers, they went up to the playoffs up in New Jersey, and they had a heck of a weekend. They came up short, and we talked a little bit, and he's like, you know what? He said, I had a good season. I did better than I did last year. And next year I'm going to do better than I did this year. But it's a choice what you do with it. And it's the framing that student athletes, or any athlete really, is able to put to the situation. Do they let failure identify them? Or do they choose to use it as hey, I did the best I could. I left it all out. I have no problems with how I played. What did I do well? What can I do better? And how do I do that?
Rennel, as someone who works daily with NCAA Division I collegiate athletes, a lot of these athletes, they were top dogs in high school, and now maybe moving up a level, they might be struggling with what their role is on the team. When you hear, the answers that you've heard so far, what is your approach to helping athletes deal with not only the success, but also the struggles that might come with being a student athlete?
So the one thing that I usually try to put into perspective is like having self-awareness. Being a former student athlete as myself, like you guys heard, with self-awareness, you kind of have an idea of some of your strengths and some of your weaknesses, because it's going to be really, really important coming into the collegiate level, because just like you said, Will, you're coming from your high school where you were that person, right? You were the one that everyone looked to. Being aware of your self-awareness and some of the strengths and weaknesses that you had is really, really important, because it's going to kind of go into your craft and how you improve and work on things. And one of the things that's really important too is performance, because you may be someone, for an example, with basketball, you may score 25 points and your team still loses. So, or you could be the opposite, where you score all of the points, but you still don't feel like you did enough to help your team, even though the team won. So it's really important to kind of have some self-awareness, be aware of those strengths, those weaknesses, your personal impact, and understand that sometimes the performance, it is something that's very, very key, but it may not be the only thing that you can bring as far as an intangible force to the team. And another thing, as far as like, with winning, is being able to like have a positive attitude toward the team. Understand it is a team sport, and making sure that you are a key component of your team, and your role is going to vary. Like Coach Tapp said, things are going to change from year to year. So one year you may be that person everyone's leaning to, and it could be another year where it's like, we may need you to be a role player.
Coach Zell, I'm sure that you probably heard everything in Rennel's answer right there. You're probably agreeing with, but throughout the course of a season, you're going to go through highs and lows. I mean, there are very few teams out there that are perfect in the sense of wins and losses. What are some techniques that you and your coaching staff use to manage these and keep your team kind of at an equilibrium throughout the course of a long season?
Well, the biggest thing that we always feel like is high school athletes, you got a connection. Coach Tab, Renee, these guys are dealing with some of the best athletes, around. And, where you're going from in high school, a new 9th grade kid versus, sometimes you got a grown man as a senior in there, and you're in two different worlds. If you can feel connected to your guys, then you'll get a better feel and a better read for the emotional roller coaster that they kind of seem to go on. Because man, as an old athlete, I know I went on that roller coaster. I'm sure all of these guys and ladies have been on there themselves. But new high school athletes struggle day in and day out with their emotions, and for us to kind of just be able to read them and talk to them and connect to them, that really is the most important thing before we even get to the baseball and the X's and O's of things. If you can be there for them, you can really kind of reach them and kind of be able to kind of bring them down from their highs. Obviously the Redskins had a tremendous season, but as those guys got to recharge and reload with their team this year, just like we do every year on our little high school teams, we got to reset. We had a great season last year, but we got to reset expectations. We kind of finished like the Redskins, close but not quite there, and we got to reset a team. And so we feel good about what we did last year, but on a high school level, we're trying to get these guys to stop reading the newspaper articles and all the hype that's online, and kind of getting them back, inside that hat. We can fit that head in there and try to get them on to the next place. But for us, it really is about connecting to your people.
You mentioned the word connection multiple times, and Aaron, I'm going to come to you now because we've talked about the victory, we've talked about the defeats, but you and I have had a conversation in the past about injury and how that can affect your mindset as a student athlete. But one thing that I really enjoyed about our conversation was how you stayed connected to your team through injury and how that helped you maintain a positive mindset. Can you kind of share how you were able to stay connected to the team even though you were dealing with an injury that kept you off the field?
Yeah, for sure. So like quick little backstory. So I tore my ACL and split my meniscus May of my junior year. So that was like less than a year ago. So I had to sit out my senior season in field hockey. I also picked up lacrosse last year. That's how I got hurt. And I still can't play, so I'm not playing lacrosse this year. And yeah, I think it's really difficult because field hockey has always been such a huge part of my life. I started playing around 6, and so now it's like 11 years later. Field hockey's always been like a really big part of who I am, and I still like wanted that to be a part of who I am. And being out for so long, it's been really difficult. Definitely like facing like anxiety and stress. And it definitely kind of affects like your perspective on yourself, because it's kind of like, okay, like who am I without my sport? Like I know I'm someone, but who am I? And so especially like this time, like I'm almost an adult, like I'm gonna turn 18, like it's been like really, really important for me to stay connected with like all of these people, like my teammates and my coaches, because like their support has helped me like remember who I am, and also still stay connected to the sport that I've devoted so much of my life to, and that I'm playing in college. Like it definitely like is super helpful that like my support system and my coaches and my teammates are just like my family, like my second family. You know, they went out of their way to keep me involved and make sure I was doing okay. And it gives you a sense of belonging and purpose that you kind of like feel like you're missing when you're not playing. Um, and there's almost like a level of guilt that you feel by not being able to support your team, like sitting on the sideline. And so, um, being involved in practices and helping where I'm needed, and then, you know, still being there at games has kind of helped me feel like, you know, I'm still contributing to my team and they're helping me just as much as I'm helping them.
That's a great point. And Rennel, I'm going to kind of come to you for a follow-up on that. When you're talking with athletes at the D1 level at ODU that might be going through an injury, is that a consistent message that they're just struggling to figure out how they can continue to contribute to the team?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Aaron on that. One of the things that I do say, and I love how Aaron mentioned this, was kind of going through a process of like validating how you feel once that injury happens. Because I think so many times with athletes, it's kind of like, okay, I'm hurt. Let me get back to the grind. Let me try to get back on the field as soon as possible and as quick as I can to be an impact with my team. But understanding that you first, you kind of just try to take care of yourself, validate how you're feeling. It is a grief process, right? It's a process of where, like Aaron said, my sport is a part of my identity. You know, at ODU, we try to teach multiple different things so your sport isn't 100% your identity, but we understand that it is a part of who you are. It's a part of your life. It is, you have those tools and those skills that has gotten you to a certain level. But also just understanding, like, it's really important to stay in communication with the team who is working with you. For an example, the athletic trainers at ODU, we tell them stay in contact with those individuals so you understand what your length of recovery process looks like, and kind of like understand as an overall, this is an adversity, right? This is, if you're in football, this is considered a missed tackle. If you're in basketball, this is a missed shot. You know, this is you missing a certain time frame or anything like that. So this is an adversity you're going to work through, but I would really like to get to a place as well, you know, working with some of our athletes at ODU, just kind of being like, it's something where we just kind of be able to tap in with that a little bit more to show some resiliency, because you know, a lot of athletes, they take the downward spiral and things kind of get really, really ugly quick, because you kind of feel like you're not a part of anything. But just being able to understand, like, validate how you feel, go through a grief process, and it's okay to feel how you feel, but at the same time, we kind of got to get things started and get things going.
Absolutely. I mean, and sports is all about team. It's about camaraderie. You want to build the best team that you can that comes together on the field or the court. You might not be best friends off, but as long as you are working towards a common goal, within those lines, then I think that there's success will come after that. But on the flip side, Callie, as a swimmer, that's an individual sport, primarily. But even when you're in relays, you're in the pool by yourself at that point. So your leg of the relay is on you. How did you manage the ups and downs when it's primarily you that controls the outcome?
I think it's really important to realize that only you can control your outcome. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, and that leaves it up to you. If you want to work hard, if you want to be dedicated, that's what's going to control your results. But also, you're in the pool every day for 5 hours with so many people and the same people for pretty consistently over your college career. And they're the ones who truly understand the work you've put in and what you're capable of. So, no matter what happens, you always have someone to fall back on, and they'll be your biggest supporters and always be there. When you stand up on the blocks, you always kind of look over at your teammates and can see all of them watching. And it just gives me chills thinking about that, because that was one of my favorite parts of swimming, is knowing that you have a team behind you supporting you.
I think in anything, in any sphere, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's life, it's that sense of community. If you find that community, that's gonna help keep you in a solid state of mind. Daryl, I'm actually going to come to you with a question from the chat. This is kind of talking about how coaches communicate the definition of a win. And this is from Dr. Christopher Lewis. He's asking about how do coaches consider wins when communicating that to their players? And some of examples that he gives are a moral victory or winning a quarter, winning a down. How do you communicate or highlight those those micro wins where the macro might be the game or the season, but how do you communicate that to the players that are under your guys that, you know what, this play might have been a victory for us in the greater scheme of things?
That's a loaded question. Because at the NFL level, it's cut and dry. Did you win or lose? There's a lot of guys' careers and futures on it, players and coaches. So a win's a win. Now you can break that down to young players, meaning that on this particular play, did I execute what I was supposed to execute as far as my stance and my alignment, my footwork, was that to a winning standard? Regardless what the outcome is, did you export and do your part of the assignment? But that's a tough one at this level because, like I said, it's pretty much cut and dry. Now, flip side of it, I have two kids that are competing in track right now. We teach them that every individual race that you do, every individual event that you do has to be your best. And all right, is my time this time faster than the time I had last time? Or my first 10 steps? Did I hand off the baton to right hand? Those are the things you kind of break it down into as far as when you're dealing with different stuff. But like I said, just at this level, it's tough. Like, did you get the job done or not?
Well, Pete, I'll come to you then.
Yeah,
at the high school level, yeah. How do we look at within the game? How do we look at something that could be a victory, even when you might end up losing on the scoreboard?
A perfect example in high school baseball. You hit a ball hard in high school baseball. You hit a rocket right at the center fielder, and you're out. And in the scorebook, it goes down as 0 for 1. The stats don't good. Daryl's mad because now the professional team's not winning over here. But you beat that pitcher on that play because you hit a rocket. You really don't have any control when you hit a baseball where it's going to go. You try to hit it hard. And, when you hit it hard, 8 out of 10 times, it's going to fall. But, 2 out of 10, it's going to go where somebody's going to make a play on you, and you just come back and you take that kid and you just reinforce the positive when he did that, so he doesn't hang his head, so he doesn't sulk, so he doesn't feel bad about it. And just like Daryl said, vice versa, you'll hit a weak dribbler up the third base line, and all the moms and dads are, yay, you did great, and you got on base, and he was lucky. He hit it so weak. He's hit it so feeble, and he got enough speed to beat it out, and he was lucky. And everybody is celebrating the infield single, and everybody is forgetting that the kid before him just hit a rocket. And so if you can kind of not necessarily break down the kid that hit the dribbler, but just kind of reinforce the positive things that you do, you are going to get kids to kind of, take those micro wins and stack them up on top of each other. And in the end, that's what wins games. You're just trying to, do the game within the game, do all the little things. We talk about little things. All these coaches and all these players on here have done the little things their whole life, and that's why they've been so successful. And so when you keep doing the little things, the big things kind of take care of themselves. But just to be mentally strong as a coach and as a player to know, if Callie were to swim her best race and she just set the American record over here, but somebody just set the world record behind her. She just swam the race of her life, and she came in second. And yet she will know that she just set the American record, and she is going to feel pretty damn good about that. But we all know that on Daryl's team, she lost. She lost, and it's just it's a tough thing at the super elite level, but for high school kids, you're just trying to build confidences and build things and build up these guys, because when they feel good about doing the right thing, ultimately good results are coming.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I'm glad you're paying attention, Pete. I'm glad you're infusing football and swimming and baseball into your answer. So good for you. You get the Star Student Award for this panel so far. Duncan, I'm actually going to come to you. We got another question from the chat. It's from an anonymous attendee, but she's talking about a young athlete. They're starting their first season of baseball as a very young athlete, and she's asking a question about how do you encourage the kid to make sure that sports are ingrained in them at a young age to be fun, so that as they continue to progress, they don't lose that sports are fun as they hopefully progress athletically and with their ability.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it can be difficult with young athletes because, especially again, social media, right? Because that's what their context is, and it's one of those things where I was talking with another hockey player, and I had asked him, like, do you want to be Connor Bedard, who's an 18-year-old kid in the NHL? His father had to sign his contract. Okay, cool. You want to be there? Are you willing to do what he did, right, to get there? But one of the things that I emphasize is process over outcome. Like, get them involved in the sport itself. Not the wins and losses will come, and I get at Daryl's level, wins and losses for sure, no doubt. But when they're starting out, it's the sport can be ruined if it's all about the outcome. But if you get them involved in the process, and like Coach Zell said, like, you get the connection, right? And like Aaron said too, like, get that family feel of a team, and Callie too, right? I know I have that team behind me, and I know Daryl's experienced it, and Rennel sees it. Concentrating on the process, doing those little things that make the game enjoyable, right? And because when they get on the field, regardless of, if they're in college or NFL pro level, like, they're not simply a football player or a basketball player or whatever the sport is, right? They have to perform. But at a young age, let them go out and learn the game and make mistakes and concentrate on the effort that they're putting forth versus the outcome, because you can't control the outcome. There's a lot of things that the other team, the other coach, the officials, they all have a say in the outcome. But that individual, that young athlete, has the choice to put in the effort to get where they want to be. So really focusing on learning the game, enjoying the game, and understanding, teaching them what sports are about in terms of the teamwork and the camaraderie and the work ethic, and doing those little things, I think is important to start at a young age, and you'll make them fall in love with the game.
Yeah, if you get the messaging right early, that's going to carry on with them. But it's also on the adults in the room too, to reinforce that message.
Yeah, if I could add in,
I think we all everybody nodded when I said that. We're all in agreement there. Aaron, I want to come back and talk a little bit about the injury side of this as well. So I know that when you talk to a lot of young athletes, especially when there's an injury involved, sometimes it's what they worry about most is, how is this going to affect my progression to potentially the next level, college, whether it's D1, D2, D3. Talk about your experience in going through that injury, but still finding the opportunity to commit to a Division III school to play collegiately, and what that experience was like in talking with the coaches and talking with the stakeholders at the university. And obviously you weren't hiding your injury. So just give us a little bit of insight into those discussions.
Yeah, so also a little bit more background. So my freshman and sophomore year were really difficult as far as sports. So like, I primarily play field hockey. I had some chronic pain issues, and I got diagnosed with amplified musculoskeletal pain syndrome and functional neurological disorder. And so, like, it was kind of seen as like an invisible injury. And so I went and received treatment in Philly at the summer after my sophomore year, and coming into my junior year, I worked really hard in the summer. It was really important to me. I was like, I understand my condition more now. I understand how to deal with it. I don't really care what people think about it. Like, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna work hard. I'm really proud of my junior season, especially in field hockey. And then I picked up lacrosse for the first time, and I actually committed during lacrosse season. So it was maybe 3 weeks before I got injured. And so my coach was really aware that I was playing lacrosse. She loved it. She's like, it's good structure. It helps you stay in shape. I was still playing club field hockey outside of lacrosse at school. And then I got hurt on May 17th, which was the very last game of lacrosse season. And I really, when I got hurt, it hurt when I got hurt, but then after, my knee didn't really hurt anymore, so I was really, not worried about it. I was, really thinking that I was, maybe a sprain or something, I was gonna be fine, and then the MRI results came back, and they were like, "Your ACL is definitely torn, and we think your meniscus was impacted," and I had, a sit-down discussion with my parents when they found out, and my sister was home from college and my whole family's crying, and I was just kind of sitting there. I don't think I really realized like what that meant. I was like, oh, okay, so like when do I play again? Um, and then I kind of realized how serious that was and what kind of recovery we were looking at. And so I definitely was a little bit nervous to reach out to the coaches at Mary Wash and kind of be like, hey, guess what? You were so happy with me playing lacrosse and now I'm hurt. I don't know what that's going to look like as far as, next year. I'm basically taking a year off. Like, I'm not playing my senior season. And so reaching out was kind of scary. But those coaches are so fantastic and they're super understanding. And that was such a blessing to me. It felt like a big weight off my shoulders that they were super, super understanding and even like telling me like, we trust that you're going to work hard and you're going to do what it takes to get where you need to be. And if you're not where you want to be when you get here, like we'll do our part and help you get to where you need to be. And so it definitely was like really scary telling them that I got hurt. And especially now it's March and I'm still not cleared. And so that's still like kind of frustrating, but the coaches are so understanding about it and um super encouraging that it kind of made things a lot easier for me.
So, Pete, that's an example of an athlete being honest about injury. Do you have any scenarios with athletes trying to hide injury from a coach? They don't want to let their team down. They don't want to let their parents down. Sometimes external factors can come into play when it comes to hiding an injury. Have you ever had any experience with that?
No, I was that experience. I was an old left-handed pitcher at Old Dominion in the 1800s. I pitched with Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. Those were my guys.
It was a good team.
There. Yes, yeah, Lincoln, tall, middle lineup guy. All right, left-handed hitter, pretty good. But anyways, I got marginal innings at Old Dominion. We were second in the country in ERA. I was the 11th man on a 12-man staff, and anytime I got innings, man, I was grateful. And I did okay, but my arm was killing me all the time. I couldn't sleep on it. I rolled over. I slept on the other side, and I know that by keeping that from my coaches, they worked me hard just like anybody else would, and they were, unintentionally, I was doing them a disservice because I wouldn't say anything and I would work and grind and get after it, and my arm was hanging. And so, by not doing that, I share that story with my guys about how I wish I had said something to my coaches so I could have, been a little more productive, not grinded through it and not worried about the innings that I wasn't going to get, but just trying to be kind of the best player that I could be. And I just kind of share that with my guys, and hopefully that they're just more honest with me about their arms and their bumps and their bruises out there, so they can, kind of be as productive as they can be. And I always tell our guys, just in the world of throwing, that we're never going to put you out there when your arm is hurt. If you're tired, if you're sore, we can play through that. But when you're hurt, we will never play you. We will never pitch you. We will never do those things. And I'm sure, whether it's at a JV level or at an elite, professional level, we don't want to put anybody out there that jeopardizes their livelihood, like with Daryl, or just their opportunity to go play, elite level. We've got a kid, maybe the top sophomore in the state, Turner Kuehl, whose kneecap popped out, as I was telling you guys the story before this thing. And he is an SEC, ACC type player, maybe a draft guy. And we won't rush him back to getting ready until he's ready. And if that means that the team, is, playing without him, and the team's a little, is a lesser team, so to speak, for a couple games, so be it. The next guy, it's next man up kind of thing, like we all say. And, we'll figure that out.
I think the one thing that we all have to keep in view is the fact that participating in sports obviously can help with athletic development, but just that sports participation can also help with personal and professional development. There are so many values and benefits that can be learned and gained from just being on the team. So it's very important to hear that coming from a coach, especially a successful coach like yourself, Pete. Callie, I want to come to you. I have a question from the chat, and obviously you're a recent top-level Division I athlete, but how would you suggest increasing coping skills for young athletes who might get down on themselves following a mistake or a bad performance? And can you give us an example of how you might have helped yourself get through one of those in your career?
I definitely think one of the things that made me successful was anytime I felt unfulfilled or didn't feel like I accomplished my goal, the first thing I wanted to do was get back in the pool. And I used that kind of anger and sadness to fuel my next practice session. And I would also always meet with my coach to where I would say, this is what I did well, this is what I need to improve, and this is how I want to improve. And that is something that always really helped me kind of talk through everything, because that was one of the most important things, was just being able to talk to someone about it and hear what they thought I did well, but also hear my own expression about it. And one thing that also really helped me that my coach had me do was whenever I felt down or felt like I was in kind of like a slump with training or competition, every day my coach would have me write down 10 things that I did well. Even if I did really bad during practice, there were 10 things I did well. And just made me highlight those at the end of the night and also write 5 statements as if I had already achieved them. That way I knew that progress, even though it might have been a bad practice, I was working towards my goals.
Very nice. I really appreciate that perspective on that. Daryl, I'm gonna come back to you. When you, now that you're on the coaching side, when you and your fellow staff members are experiencing success or going through a losing streak, what are some techniques that you might use personally to help yourself? Because we talk a lot about the athletes, but there are so many other stakeholders in the sports ecosystem that we want to make sure that everybody is operating at full capacity. So what do you do as a coach to kind of help see yourself through the highs and the lows?
Well, one thing that Coach Quinn, our head coach here, did that he brought to this team when he first got here, that we maintained throughout the course of the season, he has a program that he works with, but it's pretty much about self evaluation. So probably every 4 weeks, we'll go through. He has an app that's made, and it has different categories for how do I feel I'm doing as far as structuring my meetings, how do I feel I'm doing as far as structuring my practice, getting the guys with rotation, get just a bunch of different things that we can sort of tangibly put our grade on throughout the course of the season to see if we gotten better or gotten worse, and then how to go from that standpoint. And he'll put us through it as coaches, and he'll also put the players through it as well, just for a way to reconnect with yourself. Like I said, when things are going bad or things are going good, that we know that we're still trying to hit the incremental foundational things that we're trying to get accomplished. That's been really useful for me. I've never done that. It's been more so like Callie, far as like trying to have just self-awareness of my own space. Like, all right, I've been doing good in this particular aspect, but having it come from the top guy in the organization, it really makes it a point of emphasis that we all have to really address each and every time that we're at work.
Again, it's messaging, keeping it consistent no matter who you are or where you are as far as stature goes in the organization. That consistent messaging is key. Rennel, I want to come to you. This is kind of a general mental health and sports question, but Teresa in the chat asked, have you ever had any experience needing or wanting to refer an athlete to a mental health therapist for sports-related issues? And what did that process conversation look like?
So with doing some work in the community outside of Old Dominion University, one of the things that I often, will talk to families about when they're wanting to get their child to someone who focuses on sports performance is like making sure that, obviously that individual kind of understands what the situation is. The one thing that I will typically say is like as far as networking, being able to network with different people, the resource out there as well. I know that one of the resources that I typically will use when helping families is Psychology Today. That is a resource in which you can kind of almost create your therapist and what you would want them to look like. And then of course, as far as LinkedIn having those different types of networks with different providers, and you can reach out and see kind of what their focus is, because I think it's really important not to just work with anybody who has a background in sports or sports psychology or anything, but make sure it's kind of pertaining to what are some of the struggles that you're dealing with as well. And well, I kind of wanted to speak on some of the things that we've been discussing, and I think was really, really important when we're talking about mental health and athletics, is to make sure is like we got to have all parties on the same page, as far as coaches, It could be parents, like you said, multiple stakeholders, making sure they're on the same page of kind of promoting really mental health and kind of what does that look like, because um, it's not winning and it's not losing, right? And I know we're having a lot of these discussions about, Coach Tapp says it's cut and dry, right? And I understand that, but it is not always winning or losing. It's kind of about being fully self-aware of what this athlete kind of is struggling with, excuse me, what are they going through, understanding that, hey, just because you don't win, that doesn't make you a bad person. And just because you do find yourself losing more often than winning, that also doesn't make you a loser, right? So kind of just being fully aware of those things. And I know that I've used the word validate, validate being, kind of understand how you're feeling. When you win, there's that emotional high. I feel great. My chest is out. My head is held a little bit higher. When I lose, your head's a little bit more. You feel like you're defeated. But especially with us talking about the multiple different levels at a younger age, like we've all said, it's kind of teaching that process and kind of what does that look like, having that youth understand, like, it's not really about success, it's more of a process. So if you don't get first place, that's okay, because you have an opportunity to do it again at a high school level. I'm kind of seeing some questions in our Q&A chat, kind of asking about that fun opposed to seriousness. Well, I think at high school it should all be fun, because collegiately at the next level, it's a business. Right, we do have this thing where people are getting paid now to play the sports, and then professionally, Coach Tapp said it's cut and dry. It's either you made the play or you didn't, and that's the reality of it. So, kind of having multiple people understand that whatever level you're working with the youth on, and that impact is really going to be key in that youth's progression, because we know a lot of toxic environments, and they really, really do weigh down on our athletes.
I think that's the definition of process over results. A lot of times we get so focused on what we want at the end game that we kind of forget what it takes to get to that end game. And there are going to be missteps, there are going to be mistakes made, but are you going to be better because of that? So I think at that point, and thank you so much for kind of going back to some of the comments that we've heard and reinforcing that, because it is every single person that's involved in sports that's going to help make a difference. Duncan, I'm going to come to you. We got another question from the chat, and this kind of goes back to supporting the athlete that may be feeling down. But as a parent, adult, or coach, how can we better support the athlete who feels there is no way out after a mistake or an error or losing, especially if the team or somebody else, another athlete or coach, says that they might be the ones to blame? How do we support them and kind of help take their focus off of the outside noise?
So first, I would suggest if there's speaking about specifically about student athletes, if there are adults in the room laying blame, then somebody needs to have a conversation with that person about laying blame, because it's laying blame. First of all, it doesn't do any bit of good. And if you've ever read anything by Brene Brown, right, she's got a lot on blame and what drives it and things like that. So if there's an adult laying blame, that person needs to somebody needs to have a conversation with that person. Let's put it that way. And one of the things, that I think as adults or anybody working with student athletes or even grown athletes, right? Daryl, I know you've got guys that are mid-20s. They're barely adults, and they've been playing their sport their whole life, and their whole focus is football. And to Rennel's point about mental health and mental well-being, understanding that the feelings are great, and they're going to feel sad, they're going to feel overwhelmed, they're going to feel like a failure, and there's nothing wrong with those feelings. It's what we choose to do with them that is the big thing. And it's acknowledging that, hey, you didn't do well, and that's okay, because that's part of life. Like, life is not meant to be easy. You're going to fail, and it's okay to feel that way for a little bit. But it's when you hold on to it and you let it identify you, that's where it can become really challenging. So when faced with that feeling of I can't do anything right, or feeling overwhelmed because of mistakes, or if a team's not having a good season, because just as there's one team that wins it all, there's one team that loses it all too. And it's okay to have those feelings. It's what you choose to do with those feelings. But even more importantly, when you're talking about young adults and student athletes, but teaching them how to process that. What do they do with the feelings? because if they lead with emotion and lead with feelings, that's when you get pushing and shoving on the field, the court, the ice, or whatever, because they're just reacting versus processing the emotions. So it's okay if you do have an athlete who's feeling overwhelmed or sad or feeling down, that sort of thing, acknowledging, hey, it's okay to feel that way. Where do you want to go next? Instead of because there's a great book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee Adams. And it talks about, like, we have one or two choices when something negative happens. And that's, we can go down a judger path or a learner path. Are we just going to go down a judger path and be judgmental, right? Like Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. Or we're going to learn from the experience, understanding that, yes, I'm feeling this way and it's an emotion and it's a feeling, cool. Now I'm just going to put that away and I'm going to push forward. I'm going to get back in the pool. I'm going to use it as fuel, right? Being able to use those feelings constructively versus destructively. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, you touched on a lot of topics there, but your insight on that and being able to answer that and make sure that we continue to push it forward, very, very helpful. Daryl, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we got a few more questions that we can get out. But Daryl, I want to come to you. Obviously, you're now in the professional leagues. You're successful 12 years in the NFL, so successful at the youth level, at the college level at Virginia Tech, in the league, and now you're coaching in the NFL. I know this might be a loaded question, but how different now is the approach to mental health in sports than it was when you were a Deep Creek High School linebacker or defensive end?
I guess I'm like with Coach Pete and Coach Duncan, like, mental health, what's that? Let's get on out there and get going. But now we're more evolved, we're more aware as athletes, as coaches, to that connection aspect you all talked about earlier. Like, you can only coach a player to the depth that you know. So that means that you have to put the work in long before you even get to the season to understand what kind of player and what kind of person you're dealing with and what they have going on in their life, because that will dictate and roll into stuff later. And a lot of that stuff does have to come with just the mental space that they're in. It could be something at home with their significant other, could be with kids, could be with finance or whatever. But you have to just kind of find out where they are so that you can kind of push them and help them through those different things. We have a therapist on staff. She's open to the coaching staff, to the players at any point in time. And then just having sit-down conversations, just knowing the pulse and heartbeat of your guys in your room and on your team can help out in those spaces a lot.
Aaron, go ahead, Pete.
Well, I was just going to add on, isn't it great to have somebody like Kevin Love or Naomi Osaka or our Olympic gymnast that put themselves out there,
Michael Phelps, and Michael
Phelps, that just say that they've struggled with mental health, that they've been there and they've been on the top of the world, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of toughness. We were all grown up athletes. We were rub some dirt on it, get back in there, grind it, shake it off. You're mentally weak. You're soft. Those were all the things that we've all been kind of grown up. We've all heard. And so just a better understanding, like Daryl was saying, having a therapist, having somebody to talk to, and just acknowledging that it is not weakness, but it's just just another part of the game that we have to struggle to tackle, and that some people just struggle with it a little bit more than others. And, that it really just helps seeing some of the great athletes just kind of put it out there for everybody to see, so that the rest of us mortals can kind of acknowledge that.
The names you mentioned, and even this group right here on the screen, I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation in 2025 shows that progress has been made. This alliance was started because those stories were beginning to become public. People were, the Michael Phelps, the Kevin Loves, they were willing to share their story. And so that's at the professional level. We wanted to bring it down to the local, the collegiate level, figure out, okay, if they're talking about it, how is it being discussed in other circles? And that's probably why we're sitting here tonight having this conversation. So thank you for bringing that up and making that connection for the people who are watching this webinar as well. Aaron, I wanted to come back to you with one more question on the injury front. you talked at length about how you were able to stay connected to the team, but were there any other aspects off the field that kind of helped you make a connection to help you continue to communicate with your teammates, with your coaches, with administrators, just to kind of help you through this process? What other aspects off the field helped you through that injury recovery process?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, some people have talked about, like, being self-aware, like, understanding the emotions and not acting on them all the time, which is definitely something that was a struggle for me, especially, like, after dealing with the chronic pain and not having answers and being in such discomfort for so many years and still seeing that in parts of my life, and then finally feeling like I've gotten somewhere. I have a great junior season, I get hurt, and then there's, like, this feeling of, like, I can't catch a break, and so that, like, caused a lot of emotions, definitely some anger in there and some tension and stuff, and so, um, it definitely projected or reflected in a lot of my actions, and so taking time to, like, obviously, like, surrounding yourself with good people and a good support system, but also, like, taking time for yourself because, like, kinda like we all talked about earlier, like, hard to understand, like, who you are without your sport sometimes, and I've always had, like, a really good sense of, like, my identity, and even just, like, getting older and, preparing for college, it was really, like, it's been super, super important, like, even being in recovery now to, like, invest in myself, um, just as much as I was investing into time with good people and, my support system and, like, staying connected. I've really, like, invested in my hobbies and, like, self-care type things, like, um, photography has been, like, something that I've really, like, gotten into, and, while the injury is, like, not ideal, it, like, has given me time to figure that out, and now that's something that I'm looking at a career path in, and so, it's hard to be grateful for, like, a situation like this and to kind of, like, see the more positive side, but, like, it has given me, like, a greater sense of identity at that, and, I also think, adding on to, like, some of the stuff that we talked about, like, just a bit ago that, like, with, like, performance stuff is that, like, you can't have, like, the good without the quote unquote bad, like, the wins don't mean anything without the losses or the failures or the struggles, and so, like, choosing to be resilient in, like, this whole time of injury, it's, like, really, like, having the mindset of, like, resilience has been, like, super important and, um, just, like, I don't know, like, just because I'm injured doesn't mean that, like, I'm any less of a person or any less of an athlete or, dealing with, like, my self-esteem dropping and, like, things come and go and, like, um, even things like body image that, like, have kind of been a struggle of, like, "Okay, I'm not as active anymore, so I'm having to focus more on what I'm eating," and, like, I never really had to do that growing up, and so, like, all of these things combined, it's like you you have to, like, increase your self-awareness a lot, and, it's not necessarily a fun thing to do, but I think it kinda helps you, like, not only, like, understand yourself, but understand yourself as an athlete.
Mhm. That's a great perspective, and I think you might have had the quote of the panel at the beginning. The wins don't mean anything without the losses. So we're going to clip that one and put that one out there. We just got time for a couple more questions. Callie, I'm going to come to you as a recent student athlete. Take us back to that recruiting process going from high school to college. Is there anything that you would do differently as far as asking the colleges that were recruiting you about what sort of mental health programs or resources they provide, or was that something that was kind of already a part of the pitch?
That was definitely not as much talked about through every school that I went and toured for a recruiting trip, but it was one of the highlights of Georgia that I really appreciated, and I think it's definitely something that is important to ask when you're going through that process to know what resources are available. Because no matter if you think you at the time coach Steph Williams, who, and just as an athlete, but also as a person, as a student, as a woman and a leader. And so we would have meetings every month with our mental health and performance team as a team. And we would also be really encouraged to meet with them one-on-one, because if you aren't able to care for yourself outside of the pool or outside of the sport, then you're not going to be able to perform. And in order to be the best you can be, your biggest enemy or your biggest tool is between your ears. And that is kind of what separates the good from the best. And I think that's really important to realize, and just be vulnerable and know that no matter what people say they are able to do or what they struggle with, there's always, everyone has the voice between their ears.
Appreciate that perspective. That sometimes it's your own worst enemy. It can be your biggest champion, but you can also be your own worst enemy. Duncan, I'll give you the de facto last word, last question. Of course, if anybody else wants to chime in, please feel free. But where do you see the biggest need in terms of how athletes' mental health is being supported? We talked about a lot of good things that are going on, but what still needs to be done to progress this conversation?
So at the team level, we as adults and having the experiences, we understand that asking for help or talking about it anyways is a sign of strength. But when you're a teenager or a young adult and I go back to the last panel and the athlete there, and I forget her name, but she was a softball player, and she said, the one thing I wish I could do is talk to my teammates but about what I'm going through, because and odds are that her teammates are going through the same thing as well. But I don't want to say normalizing the conversation, but having continuous communication about mental wellness and mental health for sure. But I think it also starts with the wellness, the self-care that Erin said. Understanding what you as a person need, but I think keeping the communication open between all the stakeholders, the coaches, the athletes, and the officials, right? I know the officials get a bad rap, but they have a say in it, and they can ruin a sport for an athlete, unintentionally, but it can happen. But I think really keeping the communication open and walking the walk as leaders in whatever organization. If a young player is joining the Commanders and he sees Coach Darrell and what Coach Darrell's been through and that sort of thing, and he sees him talking about it and normalizing it and making it a part of the conversation. And if the student athletes see Coach Zell doing the same thing, or the student, wherever they're at and whoever you're dealing with, if we walk the walk, then I think that we're going to lead by example, and those student athletes are going to learn that, hey, it might not necessarily be for me because I'm good right now, but I think my teammate's struggling, so I'm going to talk to them about it, right? And showing that it's okay to have the conversation without judgment. And that's the big thing, because oftentimes when people are being judgmental, it's more about them versus the person they're being judgmental towards. And so being able to have those conversations, not necessarily openly in front of the team, but keeping the lines of communication open and walking the walk.
I'm going to actually editorialize real quick as the last word on something you said there. And I think it's very important for everybody who's attending this webinar right now or who will watch it. You mentioned officials. Officials get a bad rap, but there is only one component that every single official sporting event needs to have in place for it to be an official sporting event, and that is an official. Coach gets sick, assistant coach steps in. Star player gets sick, next man up. If the officials don't show up, the game doesn't go on. And there is a shortage of officials because of the toxicity around what they do. These are volunteers. We gotta make sure that we're treating them with the same respect that we want to be treated. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We do have officials groups that are part of our alliance, and we're trying to understand what they need, how we can support their efforts as well, because again, they're part of the stakeholder group in youth in all levels of sports. So I wanted to just kind of put that out there as kind of the bow on tonight's panel. And I do want to thank every single one of you, Pete, Callie, Duncan, Erin, Daryl, Rennel. I know it's after hours on a Wednesday night, but I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us on tonight's panel, Victory, Defeat, and Injury. So thank you so much for your insight and perspective.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If we can continue to increase the conversation and decrease the stigma around mental health in sports, I firmly believe the performance of our student athletes will improve on and off the field. By being here tonight, you are all part of the solution, so thank you again. Again, for those who are attending, this panel will be available to view and share in the coming days on the Alliance's website, yswa.org. If you would like to learn more about the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance, check out that same website. It's filled with great resources from the Alliance and our partners. Membership in the Alliance is free, and you can join direct from the website. I want to once again thank our panelists. Thank you to those who attended virtually. Thank you to all of our Alliance members. Together, we can make a difference, and I think we are doing just that. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Great job, everybody. Thank you to everybody who attended. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Thanks, Will.
you.
Thank you so much.